Good afternoon, everybody. I'm hoping that you can all hear me. I'm hoping that you can all see me. And greetings from wherever you are in the world. I know that there are a lot of Europeans on the call, but I believe there are a number of further international early careers students and aspiring sports industry executives as well that have joined us. So that's good to hear. Welcome to this session, Early Career Development in the Sports Industry. First of all, I'd just like to thank our partner, GBSB Global Business School. It's an internationally recognised educational institution located in Europe with campuses in Malta, Spain and online. And I'm aware that they do 4 Master of Sciences in Sports Management out of Barcelona, Madrid and Malta, as well as being online. So welcome to all of the students that are currently at GBSB, and thank you to them for their support for this very interesting session. The session will last an hour. It's now 2 o'clock in Europe, 1 o'clock in London. I will very shortly introduce you to the panel and we'll get going and waste no further time, although we've lost Harriet for a second. In terms of housekeeping, if you'd like to ask a question, please do so. Ask a question at any time. They will go into a list and they will get brought up as and when appropriate. We're probably going to have about 10 minutes sort of introduction to everybody. Then we're going to have probably 40-50 minutes of discussion around early careers and how to get into and break into the sports industry. And then we'll probably have 10 minutes of questions. The 10 minutes of questions really at the end depends on how many questions we are able to filter and take during the session. So it really depends. But thank you all very much for joining, and I hope you have a worthwhile hour. Careers in the sports industry is a pretty hot topic, as I'm sure you're all aware. Everybody wants a job in the sports industry, and it is notoriously difficult to access those opportunities, and it's notoriously difficult to know where to turn when you feel most doors are shut. So I'm really pleased to be able to welcome our 3 panelists today. What I'll do, I think, is I'll introduce them. Welcome back, Harriet. Well, I'll introduce you to them individually, and then they will just give you a bit of a background of who they are and what they do. So if we could start with Ian. Ian, in fact, actually, Ian, you explain who you are and what you do. So let me introduce you to Ian Grundy, who will share his background. You're on mute, Ian, sorry.
There we go. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Will. Pleased to join the panel today. And as Will said, hopefully we'll have an enjoyable hour. I'm Ian Grundy. I'm part of the You First organisation. You First is a sports marketing and talent representation agency. We were set up in Madrid around 22 years ago and now operate from 21 offices in 13 countries worldwide. So representing players on one side and also helping brands to activate in the world of sport. I've been in sport for multiple years. I spent the vast part of my career involved in sports and PR, based in Singapore and in New York as well. I just came back to the UK a few years ago. So what I'm hoping to do today on the panel is to bring some insights on working in sport and careers from an international perspective, and to give you some ideas and advice on how I entered sport, how my career progressed and where it is today now. So pleased to be here, Will. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much indeed. Patricia, let's please introduce yourself and a bit of your background.
Thank you, Will. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to be here. I'm Patricia from Spain. I'm currently an account manager for Sport5. It's a leading sports marketing agency, as you may know, maybe. And we have offices all around the world. It started in Germany, but now we're all through Europe, in France, Poland, Spain, in the UK, and also Australia, China, Japan, the United States. So it's worldwide, the agency, and we provide solutions for branding, technology. We also have a division for esports, and yeah, we work with huge brands like EA Sports on my side. So, and my background, my whole career, my whole professional career has been linked to sports. I started working with Deportivo Alavés here in Spain, and soon they sent me to some international projects in Croatia, where I worked with a first division club over there for the marketing and business development departments. And then I changed to France, where I've been for 5 or 6 months. And then I came back to Spain to work with Real Valladolid, which you may know because Ronaldo recently bought the club 5 or 6 years ago. And I've been working with the brand department and marketing, business development since then for 5 years. And then I joined Sport5, where I'm right now. So
Wonderful. Patricia, thank you very much for that. Harriet, last but not least.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to today's session. So I'm Harriet. I'm a senior data analyst at a company called AI.io. So we are a sports technology company that utilizes artificial intelligence and data analytics to bridge the gap between kind of grassroots athletes and professional sporting organizations. So I've been with the company about 8 months now. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. There's a real vast array of sports that we're looking at and being involved within, and you know, some exciting projects coming up. Prior to that, I was at Southampton Football Club for 5 years as a data analyst. So I spent 2.5 years in the commercial department as an analyst, looking at sports sponsorship, media values, and how that relates to kind of our ticket strategy and pricing strategy as well. And then switched over to the football performance department, working with players across the club, both male and female, and working with data there, which is more kind of my background. I did sports science as my undergraduate, so it linked in really nicely. Alongside that, so more plate spinning, worked as an executive director for our women's programme. So looking at how does the strategy kind of play into the offering that we have as a football club in general as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Harriet. And I think what we have here is 3 clearly very experienced executives. One in data, which is clearly a fast growing part of the sports industry in terms of opportunities for anybody looking to break into sports. And Harriet will no doubt share with you some of her experiences of how to do that. We've got Patricia, who is more the traditional sports marketing background, working for an agency, which again is very traditional. Again, a lot of people feel that that's what they want to do. They want to work in sports marketing, but probably don't quite understand the definition of what sports marketing is or what it consists of. So I'm hoping that Patricia will share some of her stories there. And then we've got Ian, who has worked outside of the industry in parallel to the industry growing up, but clearly has now transferred those skills into the sports industry and very successfully as the international director or senior director for international marketing for You First, which is very much a, as he said earlier, not only a marketing company, but also an athlete agency or athlete representation company, which I think a lot of people aspire to want to be part of, but again, probably don't realise or understand what the constituent parts are of those types of organisations. So I'm really pleased, really grateful that we've got 3 fantastic people, and I'm really hoping that we can learn a huge amount. I think if I could start by and kick off, Harriet, if we go to you first, if we may. You've started this in the sports industry pretty much straight out of university. My question really is why you wanted to join sports, and why did you want to be part of the sports industry? How difficult was it for you to get access or entry into the sports industry? And just share with you how it came about, and at what point did you finally think, I've actually got into my industry of choice?
Yeah, so I'd say I knew from a kind of a young age that I always wanted to be in sport, in terms of either whether that be an athlete, a manager, in sports journalism. What I didn't mind what job it was, I just wanted to be in sport. However, I think when I reached university, I spent a lot of time volunteering for various things. So I spent a good year on the sidelines of various sports matches at the university, writing up match reports to try out and see if that was the thing for me, to be a sports journalist. Quickly figured out that probably wasn't for me. Went more down the video route and kind of then thought, actually, this is not me either. And then through the courses that I was taking at university, I was really lucky to kind of go on a full scholarship and do my master's at Loughborough University, London, to study sports analytics. And I think it all just clicked. I was like, this is for me. But I think I wouldn't have gotten to that point had I not kind of put in the hard yards outside of the classroom to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. The minute that I graduated from my master's, I then spent 3 months at a sports publishing agency. And again, I knew it probably wasn't going to be the role that I'd spend years and years doing, but it was another insight and another window into the sports industry. And it was something I could take that first step. So I spent 3 months at this agency, and then almost got lucky really in terms of the timings of the posting at Southampton. And a lot of the job posting lined up really nicely with the stuff that I'd already learned at university. So I could actively prove that I was the right candidate for the job. And then from there, it was, I think every step that I've made, most of these steps have come through, again, me putting in the yards outside of the actual job, in terms of having conversations with people, and not necessarily having conversations to get something out of it, but more just to understand what their job role is and how they go about it. And then from that stems more conversation about, how our roles may align or even differ. So yeah, I guess in a roundabout way, that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Thank you, Harriet. Very interesting. Patricia, you've worked in Croatia, you've worked in Paris, you've worked in and you've now back in Spain. Just share with us along the sort of similar lines of why has sport been the industry that you've always wanted to work in? When did you sort of realise, and how did you go about finding yourself in this incredible industry?
Okay, so likewise, like Harriet, I found out pretty early in my life. I've always enjoyed football, and I liked going to the stadium to support my team and everything. And when I found out that there's actual people working in offices in the stadium for the club and everything, it's not just the football players playing every Sunday. That's when I thought, well, maybe I'd like to do something like that, because I had some friends, like all the friends that were working in offices and more regular jobs, let's say like that, and they were bored, like every day is the same. So I was like, okay, so maybe football sports is my thing. So yeah, I finished my degree and I started a master's in sports, kind of like the one these people watching are doing. So yeah, I think that's my thing. I entered right after my master's, and every year I realized that's where I want to be, because it's very dynamic and different, and you're never doing the same thing every day. So yeah.
And how did you get into it? How did your first job come about?
So I was actually with one of my master's professor. He worked in Deportivo Alavés, and they were hiring. So I talked to him, and I told him I was interested in the project. So they decided to go with me. So
Okay.
contacts is the answer.
Okay, fantastic. And you've experienced 3 different cultures, languages, territories already. Just how important has that been as part of your career to date?
It gives you like experience. You get to see different backgrounds and cultures. It's pretty similar the way of working, but it's never the same. So you get bits and pieces from here and there, and then you build yourself. And for example, some things we did in Croatia are not very known here in Spain or in France. So you have the experience to bring them to the table, maybe propose them as a solution. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but you have a wider range of vision of what you can do, I think.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Ian, from your perspective, you have grown or developed your career sort of outside of the sports industry, albeit very much in parallel with the sports industry, with various sort of interests that you've had both personally and professionally. Just share with us a little bit about your career and how important was it that you or that you grew up outside of the industry and then were able to use those skills to transition into the industry, and what advantages that gave you versus maybe someone that has developed their career purely in sport from day one?
Yeah, I mean, I studied at university years ago international marketing, and then kind of knew what I always wanted to do, and then went into international marketing, and I joined a Fortune 500 company called the Adecco Group, the Swiss recruitment company that was the largest recruitment company at that time. And I joined them in Hong Kong a number of years ago and had a classical marketing role, which looked at all elements of the marketing mix, either to attract clients or to attract talent, to attract candidates to be placed with clients. And one of the things that I very quickly learned, that with all of the different marketing channels that we had, sport was a very important one for the recruitment industry. And I think there are certain sectors and certain industries that lend themselves very well to sport and to be successful in sponsoring sport and getting involved in sport. And recruitment was one of those. And I could see that at that point, that if Adecco was recruiting for a large client and was wanting to recruit hundreds and hundreds of staff, that sport could be a very successful way. And at that time, I had an involvement with sailing, with America's Cup sailing, and also with Formula One. And there were 2 areas that I could see, as I mentioned, that could prove very, very successful for the investments that we made. And I think, Will, what happened at that point was when you can see an area of marketing becoming successful, such as sport, you tend to veer into that as well, because you can see that there's an opportunity to get a return on your investment. And I think marketing people will always say the same. They don't often mind what it is, as long as it gives you the return that you want. And I could see that sport was giving that return. And of course, it's an area that's enjoyable as well from a personal perspective. So if you can see it works at work, and you can see that you're enjoying working in that area, then you want to develop further there. So that was really how my journey sort of started in sport, and then became more and more sport focused as time went on.
Thank you, Ian. And just share with us sort of some of the core skills and traits that you have learned from outside of sport that you have now managed to bring into sport and help sport become more professional as a consequence.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate in 2024 that we've kind of come a long way with measurement. I think one of the challenges with sport, say 15 to 20 years ago, was that it was difficult to measure. You know, if you did branding, or you did sponsorship at an event, or if you brought clients to an event, it was often difficult to quantify the investment. And I think one of the things that I've benefited from, and probably my fellow panelists have benefited from as well, is now having the understanding of the success from that sport perspective. And it's sometimes quite difficult to go to senior executives and to position a sport. If you have measurement and you have ways of understanding the success of that involvement, it makes it so much easier. And I think the way in which we've evolved now to understanding the success of an involvement is absolutely key.
Fantastic, thank you, Ian. Harriet, you look like you're nodding in agreement there, being a data analyst yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
No, definitely, I would agree. I think particularly through those almost shared values that so from experience, having seen it from a club side and working with brands, partner brands, and that shared values model in terms of things that you want to achieve, and by the end of the season then actually sitting down and saying, well, we have actually achieved the things that we set out to achieve. I think sometimes we can stray into, because sport can be sometimes seen as this glitz and glamour, that real context and having purpose behind what you're doing and being able to measure that purpose as well is really important, I think.
Thank you. Patricia, Sport 5 clearly has been at the forefront of sports marketing, or one of a few organisations that have been in the forefront of sports marketing on a global perspective. How important has measurement and data and analytics been as you've progressed through the ranks in sport?
I'd say it's everything, because you get from content planning to reporting, you get data everywhere. You have to know your audience, you have to know your clients, the users that are gonna see your post. So you have to plan for them, and that comes from data analysis. And also when you're reporting all your work and the success or not that you've had, you have to use that data to let your client know what you've done, and that brings you value to yourself. And I think it's pretty much everything. It's you don't always see the data. It's not seen as the most important part, but for me, it's shown that it is. Absolutely.
It's the petrol in the car.
Basically, yeah.
Got it. Understood. Thank you. Just sort of moving on to navigating early career challenges. Once you have managed to get yourself into the sports industry, whether it be an internship, whether it be through one of your professors, or whether it be through due diligence and hard work, once you're in, then it becomes a different challenge, and that challenge is how do you stay, how do you grow, whether the role is the right role for you, whether the organization is the right organization for you, whether the culture is right, whether the purpose is right. Lots of different questions that everybody starts to ask themselves as to whether they are in the right place. I'm going to go with Patricia just to start with, and just sort of say, you've had sort of 3 or 4 different roles thus far in your career. What advice, or what have you learned from those 3 or 4 different roles around navigating your early career challenges?
Well, it's not always going to be easy, because in my case, for example, that I've been in smaller clubs with less, let's say, generous budget. You're always wondering what's going to happen with the club, if they're going to have relegation, if they're going to play in the first division, if you're going to have enough money for doing what you want to do, events or projects or everything. So you have to reinvent yourself and try to see, okay, I have maybe 2,000 euros to do what I do with 10,000 last year, but we have to do this. So you have to reorganize your head and go ahead with what you have, and always know the possibility that you may don't get anything. And of course, in my case, for example, last year when Real Valladolid got relegated, it was the biggest challenge, because there was a restructuring of the people that worked there, and I was one of the fired ones. And that's always a chance in sports. It goes up and down and up again. and down again. So you have to live with that, but that's one of the things you learn when you're inside.
Okay, fantastic. Harriet, you have been quite national. You sort of stayed within the four corners of the UK. I don't think that was purely down to Brexit, but you could probably blame it on Brexit if nothing else. Just sort of again share with us sort of what some of the lessons that you've learned. And you clearly moved roles recently away from a football club into a sort of tech agency startup kind of mode. That's two very different environments, probably two very different purposes. What are the lessons and what are the learnings that you've had from doing that?
Yeah, I'd say yeah, you're completely right in terms of two very different environments. I think for me, it was quite purposeful in terms of I'd reached a point at Saints. It was absolutely, I loved the environment, the people, the work that I was doing, absolutely enjoyed it. But I reached a point and I thought if I don't move now and really broaden my experiences in terms of not just in terms of sports and the variability of the different sports I could work with, but also the evolving technologies as well, there's a real risk of becoming slightly stale. I think, you ask anyone that knows me really well, they probably could have seen me at Saints for years and years. So for me, it was almost that forcing yourself to be uncomfortable, because you learn so much more, and then that can only help you and also help others around you, because I'm a big believer of, if I can learn as much and also share as much as possible, then hopefully that's a good thing. So yeah, for me it was purely about becoming uncomfortable, learning more, expanding those experiences as well, because sport it's global, there's so many different vehicles for it, so sport for good, technology for good, evolving practices as well. So yeah,
that's really interesting, Harriet, and I would absolutely concur with you in the sense that when you start a new role, you are learning and learning and learning, and you're almost exhausted after day one, and could just look at yourself in the mirror and think, I can't carry this on because I'm so tired. Where what is actually happening is that you are absorbing so much information on a continual basis, and it tends to last. It can last for a year or 2 years. But then the advice I've always received and also shared with others is that as soon as you start to taper off from learning, particularly in your early career stage, then that is the time where you need to start looking at how else or where else you can learn. That doesn't mean that you need to move jobs. It may mean that you can stay in the same organization and just move sideways. But that attitude of a continual personal development program is something that I think is absolutely imperative for anybody in the sports industry, because you can very quickly get stale, you can very quickly be sidelined, you can very quickly sort of be moved to the left or to the right, and it is your job and your job only to be the master of your own destiny in terms of how to move that forward and keep on top of moving yourself forward. Ian, just from your perspective, you are senior director at You First. You see a lot of people sort of come in and into your organisation at an early career stage. How is You First sort of looking after its early careers, and how do you sort of identify that talent, and how do you encourage them and develop them as they come through the system?
I think one specific response to that, Will, is we have a lot of individuals that apply to us that want to work as football agents. I think it's a very attractive area to work in. Finding good football agents is often difficult, and one of the things that You First and its talent attraction approach is doing very well now is bringing people into the business. They may work in public relations, they may work with the legal team, they may work in a number of different areas, and they start to understand the business, understand how it works from a PR perspective with a player, how it works from a legal contract perspective with the player, how it works from a HR perspective. And then when they've got those individual skills, there's the opportunity then to move or transition into becoming an agent. And I think one of the areas that we're very good at is identifying good people that we want to bring in, that we may not know exactly where they're going to end up, but you want, when good talent comes along, you want to grab it very quickly, make sure that you bring it into the business, let the talent develop in different ways as well, support the individuals with learning, training, what they need, the relevant coaching, and then see where they fit into the business. And especially now within our football agent business, we've got a lot of individuals that came in and went down that route. And I'm a big believer of that. I've done that myself. I've seen a really good individual come up and I've said, I'm going to bring them into the business. Don't know where it's all going to end up yet, but I don't want to lose that particular talent. And so I think the message there is also on the other side is when you're considering a business, a thing like that, don't get too hung up on the actual job. But if there's an excellent organization or a great organization that you want to join, then that's a great moment to move in there. Yeah.
It's interesting, and another sort of snippet that I'll share is that I feel that a lot of organisations, and it sounds like yours is similar, Ian, is that people are hiring for attitude and training for skill, and that is for any of the listeners out there that are currently navigating their early career paths. It is the attitude that people will remember. It's the attitude that people will be focused on. They don't expect you to have, the broadness of skills or have developed skills or have the experience of having those skills, but they will expect and should expect and do expect to have an attitude that matches the aspirations and the objectives and the purpose of the organization at hand.
Yeah, I would agree. I think attitude and how you approach work and life in general is really important. And I think, Harriet talked just now about learning. I'm a massive believer in lifelong learning, that for anybody in the workplace, that should never stop because everything's changing. If I look at sport now, sport's very complex. I mean, media rights, understanding of how rights holders work is incredibly complex and it's continually changing. And I think if you've got that right approach and you've got that right attitude, and you also show that you want to just keep learning, doesn't matter if you're 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, there's never a time to stop learning. And I think you add those two together and then you've got something that looks pretty attractive to an employer. Yeah,
completely agree. And thank you. Just as a reminder, we're about 60 people that are currently live on the session at the moment. There are a few questions coming in, so that's great. Thank you very much for that. I'm desperately trying to find one at the moment that's relevant, but I will do that in a second. But please do send in your questions via the chat, and we'll get those answered by the panelists as soon as we can. So keep those questions coming in. Patricia, just again, you've had some good experiences in a number of different organisations. What's been the highlight of your early career to date? At what point have you woken up in the morning and have gone, I'm so pleased and happy that I'm in this industry? And it's not when the paycheck comes in at the end of the month.
Well, of course,
in sport that never happens.
No. You shouldn't expect a high paycheck for sure, but well, it depends. Yeah. I'd say it's an industry where you see your work very clearly. For example, especially in marketing, because you're developing some kind of contents and things that are gonna be broadcasted or shown on social media. So you actually see the result of your job. You can go on Instagram and see the club's account or the league's account, and you go to your friends and see like, hey, I did this. This is my work. So it's kind of fulfilling for you to see that what you're doing makes sense and people are liking it. That's for me the nicest part, for example.
Fantastic. What about you, Harriet? What's the bit that gets you out of bed in the morning and you go, you're happy to be part of an industry that you've probably dedicated most of your life to more than anything else?
Yeah, I'd say I guess as a general point, where I'm at the moment, it's the purpose of the company in terms of providing opportunity to all. I'm a firm believer that sport really is for everyone, and I like being a part of a company that is rolling out products that allows that to happen. And then I say kind of more specifically, so I've played football from the age of 6.
Were you a Southampton? Are you a Southampton fan?
So I'm a Blackpool fan, but a Saints fan is like my second kind of team.
It is now.
Yeah. So played from the age of 6. Played at various points in the women's pyramid. Even played for the women's team at Saints for a short time. But as a kid, played for Southampton, and the team got cut when the men's team got relegated. So to have been able to kind of be at the top of that tree and be able to almost rebuild that pathway, and see the girls get promoted up to the championship, and all the hard work that went into that was definitely a very much personal highlight. Just because it was having seen it as a child, the impact that decisions like that have, and then being on the reverse side of it and being able to then provide more opportunity was quite special. So.
Fantastic. I think you both alluded to how quickly you can make an impact, in whatever your role is. If you were in a big corporate, it might take you, months, years, decades. What you have both shared is that how quickly, at whatever level of experience, you can have an instant impact or a very quick impact and actually see the benefits of that and reap the rewards. Ian, I know that you've had, through your Adecco connections, you've had some fantastic sponsorships that you've been involved in. What was the one moment amongst those that you treasure, the memory that you treasure the most?
I think to find one, and it's based on results again. I'm a big believer, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So staying on that theme of results, it was several years ago, and we had sponsored 6 franchises in the NBA. And the aim was to attract talent during an NBA game. So the sponsorship signage that ran along the NBA game was a telephone number, and it was encouraging people to call up and to apply for jobs. And the call centers stayed open for 1 hour after the NBA game had finished. And after that 1 hour, night after night, game after game, we used to get 100% of the talent that we needed. And I can remember talking to the NBA teams probably about 2 years into the partnership and saying, we're ending the partnership because we've achieved our objectives. We've managed to build a talent pool of individuals from this. And I think for me, that highlight is always when you can firmly say there's millions of different marketing channels you could approach, and sponsorship is just one of them. So when, as an executive, you go down that line and you commit and you put yourself into the limelight of that working or not, the highlight is when it really works and you actually achieve your objectives. So I think that involvement with the NBA was very special several years ago.
Very good, Ian. Thank you for that. We've got some good questions coming in, and some of the questions are centered around people that are outside of the sports industry and looking to get into the sports industry. And I'm a big believer that you don't need to necessarily get into the sports industry straight from the outset, and actually developing skills outside of sports in what could be seen as more professional industries, or certainly more functionally focused areas is a good thing. And then how you transfer those skills into the sports at whatever stage it may be can be tough. It can be a battle. Ian, from your experiences, because you are proof of the pudding, or proof in kind, what sort of advice would you give? I'm just looking at some Florian has sent something in saying that he's got several years experience in sales and wants to change career direction and move into the sports industry. Sophia is similar. She's currently working outside the sports industry and looking to pivot into it. What would be your top tips to find a job in sports? Ian, where would you pitch in on that?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that every job sector or career sector is probably represented in sport, and we touched on some of those just now. You know, sales, human resources, IT, technology, marketing, you know, all of the areas that you would see in any type of industry or sector is featured in sport. So I think, you know, I think one of the questions came from somebody that was involved in sales. You know, sales is obviously huge inside a sports perspective. So I think there's no real barrier if you're good at what you do and you've got some experience, then to really consider that could be a way of moving into sport. I think the second thing is, one thing that happens in sport a lot is that a lot of people's new jobs are found from networking as well. And I think it's really important to be very active, to be out there meeting with individuals that are involved in sport, and networking is really key as well. But I think, you know, clearly there's so many different functions and so many different areas involved in sport, that there's no one that really should be left out, or no career or sector that should be left out of that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Ian, and I think you have to go out and look for it. You have to you have to exercise all of the different channels and opportunities that you can. I think one individual said that they were looking to move into sales, and they were advised to go somehow be attached to the transfer market because this is where the majority of money is. Would you agree? Let me just read that again to make a bit more clarity. When I talked to a couple of people already working in sports and mentioned about my ambitions about transferring into the sports industry, I got feedback saying that I should somehow be attached to, typical, it just disappears. I should be attached to the transfer market because this is where the majority of money is. I have a view on this, but Harriet, what's your view on the transfer market from your knowledge of Southampton?
Yeah, it's definitely that, you know, I won't disagree that there's there's vast amount of money flying around. However, that's probably very much the tip of the iceberg in terms of the actual realities behind those that make that function work.
Yeah.
You'll see many headlines of, you know, the numbers that are being thrown around, but actually the people that are making that happen, in terms of the lawyers, the finance departments, the performance directors, the managers, the analysts, collectively as a group, they'll be working really hard, and their job is to bring purpose to it. And I think, you know, everyone on this call, you know, sport is not if you're not an athlete, it's not going to be the highest paid job. If you're looking for monetary value and that's your sole thing, go to banking or go to financial technology, something like that. Sports, you know, I think many of the people that I've come across in sport, they do it because they love it and they're really passionate about it. And that's not to say that some jobs aren't going to be, you know, really heftily, you know, rewarded, but I'd say if you're looking to get into sport and money is your sole objective, it's probably it's kind of questioning as to whether you're doing it for the right reasons. I guess, yeah.
And I also think that the transfer market, it's very typical of people that don't quite understand the sports industry, which is what they see in the media must be where the sports industry is. So actually, most people look at the sports industry and go, oh, I want to be an agent or I want to be a coach, because that's actually all they read about in the paper. If you want to be an agent, then that needs to be an end goal. It shouldn't be a goal to start with, because it's very, very unlikely you'll get it, and it's also very, very competitive. So what you need to do is build your skill sets up, look at life or look at your career as a triangle, And when you start at the beginning of that triangle, and you need to be broad, not very deep, but very broad. As you continue to grow and continue to develop as an individual, the walls will start coming in. So you don't have as broad a range of skills, but you have the skills that you do have become deeper. And as you get to the very top of that triangle, you are a specialist in a specific area that is deep-rooted skills that becomes your IP and becomes the value, and that's what you charge, and that's what people pay you. If that's in the transfer market, it is what it is. If it's a lawyer or in the finance department or in procurement or in IT, you get paid the market rate for being the expert that you're in. Patricia, you've worked in a number of different sort of football environments. Where do you think what I'm trying to say here? What the transfer market is one part of the football industry. Where do you think the real opportunities exist within the football clubs for the entry level or for the early careers market? Where do you think they should be targeting their focus?
Okay, so right now I think there are lots more of opportunities than a few years ago, because clubs are getting more, professionals for what they do. Some years ago, they will just go with 4 people doing everything. And now they're getting more professionals specialized in, brand or partnerships or legal communications or everything. So if you're a professional on those fields, maybe you can apply like easily to a club. They're really close on posting jobs sometimes, especially in Spain. They don't post jobs. You sometimes have to reach directly to them, send your CVs, or make connections, networking with them before you get in touch with them. But I would say you can go ahead and send an email, see how things are going at the club, maybe offer yourself, and they will take your CV. And if there's an opportunity racing inside the club, they will call you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Patricia. Good advice. I'm going to sort of reopen something that we touched on very briefly on earlier in this session. And I think we were talking about media rights at the time, but clearly the world is evolving. We've had the COVID. We've had for those that are fortunate not to have been affected by it, well done. But us British people have had to deal with Brexit and the challenges around that. There's financial challenges. There's political challenges everywhere at the moment, and sport is not immune to some of those challenges. I want to just sort of look into the future a little bit, and as a new person coming into this industry, having done a degree, or whether it's an undergraduate or a postgraduate at GBSB, what do you think the future holds in terms of where the opportunities really will be? I mean, Harriet, you're coming from the data side. Ian, you're coming from the sort of commercial player side, and Patricia, you're coming from sort of the agency support side. Harriet, where do you where, if you were to pitch in and go, right, this is where the pockets of opportunity and growth is going to be for the future, where would you plant your tree?
Oh, it's a good question. I'd say, coming from a data perspective, well, I'll come from it from a data perspective, and then I'll come to it from a more general point. So from a data perspective, I think we're starting to see the shift now of using data properly, or at least building the appropriate pipelines to use that data. Sport is notoriously, sport in the UK is notorious for being behind the times for utilising data. I think America, they're doing really well at how do they advance their sports, like baseball, basketball, things like that, using data. So I think particularly here it will be moving from it would be like an engineering perspective of how do we provide the infrastructure to use it properly, so that we can then do the more advanced stuff of utilizing AI models, large language models within sport. I think on a more general point, particularly around like women's sport, we're seeing, particularly in football, massive booms. And I think clubs, organisations, and also brands are really starting to wake up to the impact that it, you know, if there's more kind of visuals on women's sport and more emphasis of the benefits, then everyone wins, and the opportunities as well. So I'd say, yeah, women's sport's definitely probably one area that will boom as well, or continue to boom.
Thank you, Harriet. Patricia, what about from the chair that you sit in currently at Sport 5 and the glasses that you wear into the industry? Where do you think the big boom areas are going to be from a revenue and ultimately a talent or staffing perspective?
I would say digital marketing in some areas. For example, going abroad to look for more fans rather than staying in your community. So you have to know how to reach those new customers for you. So exploring new markets, new trends, being really up to date with social trendings and new social media that are channels that are going to be arising in the next years. I think that's a good opportunity for people trying to get into sport marketing.
Digital marketing is a growth opportunity for people looking to get into the sports industry. Ian, the sort of same question to you, but I'm also gonna entwine that question, somehow trying to bridge it between the two. But there's quite a few questions around bringing people that don't have the right visas or trying to bridge that gap between where they are, where their passport is from, and where they ultimately want to get to, whether that's into the UK or into the EU. They're all doing sports degrees, but are finding it difficult to get sponsorship from organisations to help them bridge that gap. So first question was around where you think the career opportunities are, and secondly, is there any advice that you would give students that are looking to try and transfer themselves into more developed sports industry markets?
Okay, I think to take the first question on where we're going from a sport perspective, I think that we've got a really interesting opportunity with where sport meets entertainment. And I think that's a huge change in what's happening in the sports sector today. And a way of explaining that would be the Netflix series Drive to Survive. Is it sport or is it entertainment? And the answer is it's both. And I think there's a massive change now in how sport, if you look at all of the Netflix, Amazon Prime sports documentaries that are happening, there's this huge interest in people that may never have watched a sport before, may never have been interested in that sport, and are now finding it fascinating because it's being portrayed in a different way. And I think Patricia's point about social media is adding to that and supporting that as well. And I think that they're big changes. If you look at an agency like You First, you know, we're getting involved in podcasting more, in film production, in documentary production, and that's a significant change as well. And I think for someone that's entering the industry, that's a whole new opportunity area as well, media production, film production, developments. So I think from that perspective, that's really exciting. I think to your second question, Will, it's an interesting one. It comes back to almost where we started of being humble and bringing value. I think it's fair to say that it's quite difficult at entry level to start jumping across multiple countries into jobs. I think it's something that should be considered is internships, coming in at entry level, gaining that experience. You know, I've seen it so many times where somebody comes into an organization, they may not be receiving exactly the salary they want. It may not be the exact job they want, but once you bring value and you bring worth and you gain respect, people move very quickly. And I think, I've been fortunate in my career to have moved lots of countries, but it's only from working hard in another country when an opportunity came up. And I think that's something that you have to be humble and you have to bring value. And once you do that, then there's opportunities to move. It is quite hard to apply from a job overseas. I think that's something that's quite difficult because an employer is always going to look and say, can I hire locally and can I hire at a competitive price locally? Bringing somebody in from another country can sometimes be the second option, but they're always going to try and hire locally. So I think let's get that experience, get in through the door, bring value, bring worth, and bring right attitude. And that's when the careers can start to progress really quickly.
Thank you, Ian. Very wise words. Still lots of questions coming through. Thank you very much for all those questions. Clearly, we're not going to be able to get through all of them, so I apologise in advance for that. We've got probably three or 4 minutes left. I think this part of the session is always interesting, and I'd like each of our panelists just to have a think about the one piece of advice that they can share with the audience that you think will help them most in terms of navigating their early career path, where at whatever stage that may be, and if we can sort of focus that in on football, great. If we can focus it in on marketing, great. If we can focus it in on marketing and football, then even better. But not too precious whether it's both, but if it's one, then that's good enough for me. Harriet, I'm going to kick off with you if we may. Just one piece of advice that you would like to share with the audience in helping them navigate their early career pathways.
I'd probably just say be a sponge at this early point. Take in as much as you can in terms of, talking to people, learning more. As you've touched upon already, Will, that breadth of knowledge and experience. Just soak it all in.
Good to know. Thank you very much, Patricia. What's your piece of advice?
I would totally say don't be afraid to make mistakes, because that's the best thing you can do to actually learn. Do things, get things mistaken, get wrong. Everything you can do, it's a good thing, because if you don't do something, you're not going to learn. You only learn by doing things, if that makes sense. Yeah. So just experience everything you can do and travel, try new things. Just you're here to enjoy the trip. So
that's very, very interesting, Patricia. We have a saying in this organisation that you can make as many mistakes as you want, but just don't make the same mistake twice. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Someone else can answer that question. Ian, what about from yourself?
I would say understand that no doesn't mean no forever. If you get setbacks from applying to a organisation or a club or a rights holder, and you apply once and get a no, and you apply twice and get a no, keep going. If there's an organisation or a club or a team or an area in sport that you want to work in, it's a very fluid industry. People are changing all the time. So identify those areas that you want to work in and keep going. No doesn't mean no forever. No just means no for now. And I think to stay focused and, bringing in the things that Harriet said about learning and continual learning. If you keep doing that and you keep going, you'll eventually get the role that you want with that organisation. So being a little bit hard-nosed and being a little bit committed to the process can really help.
Very good, Ian. Thank you very much. And I, for what it's worth, will add my 2 pence into this. And to me, it's about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Okay, we have alluded to it many times in this session today, but we've never actually said it. That we've talked about making mistakes. That's going to be uncomfortable, but get used to being comfortable with that uncomfortable. Be a sponge. You're going to have to go and meet people, talk to people, learn from people, ask questions to people. Some people don't like that. It'll be uncomfortable to begin with, but ultimately and over time, it will become comfortable again. Okay, getting rejections, it's uncomfortable. Get used to it. It will become comfortable, and then you will ultimately become comfortable with the uncomfortable. If anyone understands that, you've done very well. Thank you all very much indeed. I'd like to thank Harriet, Patricia, and Ian for their insights. It has been very, very helpful, very, very useful. I hope we've had some fantastic questions. I hope we've answered most of them. I am aware that we haven't answered all of them. I'd also like to thank GBSB for their partnership in putting this on. I really do think this is an invaluable opportunity for people to learn and people to evolve from people that have done it recently and have done it over the years. So it is, I'm extremely grateful to all three panelists, to GBSB, and to the whole audience that have spent the last hour listening to us, and hope that they have learned something that will help them in their careers going forward. Thank you all very much indeed, and we hopefully will see you again at some point in the future. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.